Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Jukebox Zeros, where your idols come to die, the home of Father Alexander, the poet laureate of Boston's music review scene.
That's right, that's me. That's Mr. Father Alexander, everybody. Oh my goodness, thanks for having me on the
God.
program. Hey, let's knock.
You sound nothing like the way you write.
Nope, knock.
And
Knock.
you keep handing out thesauruses to everybody.
I asked you a question. Knock.
Oh, who's there?
It's Father Alexander, everybody. It's me.
Okay, you
Everybody
suck. Get out of here, Father Alexander.
Well, that's going to be a problem because Mr. Patrick, he had to run some errands and he told me to fill in this afternoon for him.
Oh, God damn it.
I'm just kidding, guys. Hey, guys, I'm just kidding.
I'm not
it's
co-hosting an episode with Father Alexander.
You don't have to, because it's just me. It's just me, Patrick. It's your friend, Patrick. Everybody knows it's just me. It's just me. Don't worry about it.
And I'm Lels.
Welcome to the program.
Some people have told us that we include way too many New England-specific references in our show.
Those people would be correct.
Yeah, I can't fault that logic.
No, you cannot. But yeah, hey, Season 4, Episode 2, number 55. We have made it. Good
Season
God.
4. If you'll recall from our last episode, we're jerks now.
Yeah, big jerk-ass box heroes. That's what we are. We're
heroes.
We're mean and dumb. That's what we do this season.
The stupid jerk year.
We're the stupid jerk year. We're just big old dumb jerks. We're going to take your lunch money and give you a wet willy. All of those things.
We're going to say terrible things on Xbox Live.
Oh, yeah. That took
and
a
then
turn.
Get really angry if anyone calls us out on it. It's the apology section.
Sorry, don't be angry.
Got anything to apologize for, Pat?
Just that god-awful Father Alexander impression I tried to do there at the beginning. I'm going to improve upon it a bit, and I don't know. I think I got stage fright at the last minute, so
Should we bother to explain the whole Father Alexander thing? Because I'm thinking no.
No, we leave it a mystery. It's better for the listener to sort of formulate their own story. It puts their own sort of personal touch into it, and they feel like they too are a part of Father Alexander in their own sort of special way. Because we kind of all are spiritually.
It's like when a video game doesn't give a character a name. You're supposed to reflect yourself into the character, in this case, Father Alexander.
Right. My sister and her boyfriend found a kitten in the woods a few months back, and I'd say he's probably maybe 6 months at this point. Still no name.
Oh, that's nice.
Just kitten, or just kitty, or the cat. Still no name as of yet, but...
I was really hoping that you brought that up because they named it Father Alexander.
No, I'm really glad they didn't, though. But hey, listen, if any of you listeners out there want to take a crack at naming the cat, it's a really cute little tiny gray guy. So if you got names,
sounds cute.
Yeah, I'll try to get a picture up on social media because we do that.
Send your names to Jukebox Zeros. Text 1 for cat and 3 for yes.
And 4 for
2.
3. Yeah, that's how that works. Do you have anything you want to apologize for, Lils?
I'm just going to apologize up front for my notes for this episode because I feel like I kind of whiffed them for the most part. So expect me to be extra silly to make up for it because you and our guest are going to have to hold up the glut of criticizing the sound this time around.
And giving a shit about Queensryche.
Who said that? Could that be our guest?
I believe that is our guest, and actually return guest from the Cum episode. We got Down City Armory brainchild Todd Bowes back on the program.
Remarkably cum-free this time, which is so sad. I'm actually enormously disappointed in both of you for subjecting me to the distinct lack of Prince awesomeness again. So I'm really angry at you two right now.
At some point you have to do something that you don't like on this show. Okay, it can't all be fun and games. We are in the trenches of actual shit, and I think we need we need recruits in the trenches with us to sort of help navigate this nonsense.
It's more like I've been conscripted, honestly. I would say recruiting is like fairly assumptive way of putting it. I've definitely been conscripted more or less against my will here. And now the trench is just filled with urine, and I'm really sad. So thanks guys. So glad to be here.
Yeah, really important to note that he's sad and in urine.
Jukebox Zeros, a trench full of urine.
And that's
our other tags. That's our other tag.
I was going to say that's the new subtitle for the season.
Jukebox Zeros, we're jerks now, a trench full of urine.
Yep.
I think we should get we should encourage listeners to contribute drawings of all these things that we come up with, all these musings that we come up along the way. I like trench full of urine. I think that could be useful.
See, I'm just imagining, because a while back we were discussing potentially doing a new logo for Jukebox Zeros.
Now you have
I'm just imagining like
trench urine.
Just the big title up front, Jukebox Zeros, and like 50 subtitles slowly making their way off the screen.
No, doing like a Star Wars crawl, like just like all these horrible like subtitles.
Because I have to imagine with each consecutive episode we're going to add another subtitle to it.
Yeah.
Oh, can we just have like an animated GIF as our logo that just continuously scrolls through all of our taglines and slogans that we've accumulated over the years?
Or like the title and just like a bunch of Post-it notes stuck to the bottom with each subtitle on it.
Oh, yeah. I really can't wait for, like, amongst the more elegant phrases that we've come up with, the phrase, we're big fat jerks now. That'll be the piece de resistance for sure.
So I'm going to also contribute to the apology section, because I'm going to apologize for the fact that I'm still going to have to go check my laundry. So I'm going to encourage all the listeners at home to listen for the subtle edit these guys are going to have to make to splice out me going to get my laundry. So
that's great. Yeah, if you guys can point out where it happens, you will win a prize.
Then you will win bragging rights.
That's the prize.
You also might be able to win one of possibly 2 socks that I have that have holes in them, because I don't need them anymore. So
I know the socks.
Todd is going to gift you sock puppet starter kits.
Sock puppet starter kit. Yep.
Watch this. We're reviewing an album today, right?
We are.
Do
you want me to talk about it? Is that what this is all leading up to?
No, I'm just wondering if I should get into like my introductory.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about the band that everybody cares about. Just like the Clash, the most important band of all time. Oh wait, no, they're not at all.
All right. Wikipedia defines the subgenre of music progressive metal as a fusion genre melding heavy metal and progressive rock that combines the loud aggression and amplified guitar-driven sound of the former with the more experimental, cerebral, or pseudo-classical compositions of the latter. What bands belong under this banner is a topic of much debate and surely depends on one's definition of progressive music. But most fans of the genre tend to agree upon a big 3 of acts that defined and revolutionized the genre. From Connecticut, Fate's Warning. From Boston, Dream Theater. And from Washington State, the subject of today's episode, Queensryche.
Wow.
I can't believe that Connecticut made that list. That, like, Connecticut is one point of the progressive metal trifecta. Like, that seems so awful.
I mean, there's nothing else going on there, but let them have a cornerstone of something. It's
yeah. Let
it's
them have
metal.
Maybe it
it's
makes
not
sense.
It's not like anything that noteworthy.
Let them have bragging rights for something other than New Haven pizza.
Here's how many bored white males do we have in Connecticut? Oh, clearly we're a progressive metal capital. Then
Oh yeah, it does stand to reason,
right?
Know? Fate's Warning has this sound of a band that eats tomato pie. I oddly enough, I do know of Fate's Warning, and I had one of their albums when I was a kid. Sorry, but we're going on a Fate's Warning tangent when we really don't need to.
We really don't need to.
That group existed.
No, we don't.
Please continue.
So, Queensryche are not just considered one of the most important progressive metal bands of all time, but have sold over 20 million albums worldwide, 6 million included in the United States alone. They've earned major critical acclaim for their famed third record, Operation Mindcrime, which is often considered one of the greatest concept records of all time, while their follow-up, Empire, earned them multiple Grammy nominations and scored them a major Billboard hit in the ballad Silent Lucidity. In 2012, however, after decades of material which varied in quality and commercial success but maintained a pretty massive cult following among metal fans, a major split occurred which changed the dynamics of the band dramatically. After internal tension occurred between founding vocalist Geoff Tate, who had been increasingly controlling over the band's direction, and the rest of Queensryche, he was expelled from the group. A series of confusing legal battles ensued surrounding the name rights to Queensryche, and the final result of which ultimately sided with the rest of the group, but for a brief period of time, both Tate and the rest of the group were both legally allowed to perform under the banner of Queensryche. Tate capitalized on this by releasing an album, Frequency Unknown, in 2013, occasionally stylized unsubtly as F.U. in reference to his former bandmates. With an assortment of session musicians under the Queensryche name, effectively creating two different versions of the same act. Frequency Unknown was tepidly received upon release and has gone down in the annals of music history for the bizarre legal battle surrounding it. Today we're going to discuss this legal battle, but mostly listen to Frequency Unknown by Queensryche in name only. So, Quino, I guess.
Yeah, Quino. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Beneath the weeping willow lies a weeping Quino.
A tale of two Queensryches. Wow, what a tale! Talk about a band that
it was the worst of times. It was the worst of times.
It sure was. Talk about a band that just doesn't deserve to have two iterations of it in the world. Like,
yeah, would you like to tell me about it? Because unlike you two guys, I went into this knowing next to nothing about Queensryche, and for all the research I've done, I still know next to nothing.
Honestly, like the fact that there were two Queensryches is like, it's not even an interesting story compared to like other examples of there being like two bands like concurrently performing, like whether it was Fear Factory had this happen to them, or
Gene Loves Jezebel.
Laibach is actually one of the more interesting examples where there's been like multiple Laibachs, but this was actually planned, where like they would have like 2 or 3 versions of Laibach going out on the road at the same time, and
that sounds like a Laibach.
That
thing,
is totally
for sure.
a Laibach thing, and I remember reading an article about it where the author of the article was interviewing Ivan from Laibach, and he was interviewing Ivan at a show, and they're talking about Laibach and everything, and then during the course of the interview, Laibach begins to perform, and someone who sounds like Ivan is on stage singing, but the author is like, "Oh wait, I'm still talking to Ivan backstage, interviewing him for the show. What's going on here?" So like, yeah, the dual Queensryche thing is like, it's just sadness all the way through, with Geoff Tate being a dumbass. So
yeah, and I think it really speaks to Queensryche being a corporation and how just lame that is in the face of what is supposed to be rock music or whatever. And yeah, it having like legal battles beleaguer your story that much just like really speaks to how cold and clinical you conducted yourself as a musician and an artist, I guess.
Never mind that, like, at this point in Queensryche's career, in the 21st century, like look, you're a legacy act at this point, like you you're not going to have another hit record. You're probably aware of that, but you have a great legacy. You have all these classics that, you know, an entire generation of people are still going to come out to hear. Maybe you're playing smaller venues, but you can still, you know, tour and perform and come out with new records on that. There's no reason to go through everything that they went through for this album, and it's just like now.
Yeah, and I think that's
you know, look at all this nonsense you're putting us through.
Right, and I think
damn it, Jeff.
Yeah, and like these days, yeah, they could be a legacy act, but they were almost trying to toe two different lines as a legacy act and also an act still creating music. And it's like, pick a relevant act, and it's like, pick one or the other. Anyway, so I'll get into my spiel about Queensryche, I guess, now. Really, probably the only reason why this album would have been considered for the program. Otherwise, I was a Dream Theater fan band that you brought up earlier, or rather, I kind of discovered them through the internet somehow. On like someone had a website that was just sort of showcasing all these metal bands that he liked, and I found Dream Theater through there. Found A Change of Seasons and really liked that album, and I had heard of Queensryche through that same website, but had also heard Sign of the Times on AAF when that came out as a single in like 1997. And I had no idea that band was also this band that did Operation Mindcrime and like that sort of level of prog metal back in those days, because here the Sign of the Times single was like supposed to be this like grunge, supposed to have this like grunge aesthetic to it or something. So I just like weirdly really got into Operation and Mindcrime and Empire when I was like in 8th or 9th grade, and I was like a Queensryche stan. Even though, like, this was in, you know, I want to say like 1999, 2000, a time when they couldn't be like any less relevant, really. So I was kind of on my own there, I guess, and they were kind of they kind of held a special place in my heart because of that. I really liked Chris DeGarmo's guitar lines. I thought they were like very well written and kind of like weirdly reminiscent of stuff that Jerry Cantrell would do, like just albeit on a more like blues rock level.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I'm going to have a point about that later when we get into the tracks.
Yeah.
and this is the moment where I'm going to go change my laundry.
You'll never be able to pinpoint that at it, fans.
Nope. Absolutely.
But like you mentioned like the whole grunge sound kind of thing, and that sort of speaks to something that made it kind of difficult for me to like, because like I went like under your guys' suggestion, I went back and listened to Empire and a couple of other Queensryche stuff. I listened to Operation Mindcrime, and like this band has this reputation of being like super important to progressive metal, but I feel like that really only properly takes place for a very short period early in their career, because they've, unless there's like some newer material I'm missing, because they very quickly shift from, you know, kind of progressive-y kind of band to close to glam metal very, very quickly.
Well, it's important that you bring that up because they really weren't progressive metal even on some of their earlier records. They were more like, yeah, they kind of touched upon like hair metal aesthetic, just with more cerebral lyrics, I guess. They weren't, you know, singing about partying. Yeah, they really took a hard shift into pop by the time we got to Empire. And that's a very slickly produced record, too.
Yeah, like Jet City Woman in particular, like, stands out. Like, that's a straight up fucking glam rock, like a fucking glam metal song right there.
Yeah, it's very...
There's just, like, no way around it.
They kind of carried a little bit of that into the following record, Promised Land, which is kind of where I left off, the one that they did in 94, where that one is, like, it's a little more atmospheric. Like I think Geoff Tate even like plays some saxophone over it, which is like kind of interesting. But they don't really ever go into like overly cerebral, mathy sort of prog rock that Dream Theater would dip into. Like they didn't do too much in the way of guitar histrionics or
So like if I'm understanding you correct, it sounds like the sum total of Queensryche's progressiveness is just the verbosity of their lyrics more than anything.
Pretty much. And also their influences are technically kind of progressive rock, but not the ones that you'd expect. Like they pull a lot of influence from later era Pink Floyd, which you can hear very obviously on the Michael Kamen orchestrations on Silent Lucidity. And then,
Silent Lucidity, I should also mention, that straight up sounds like the blueprint for like a Creed ballad right there.
It sort of is.
Except Pink Floyd actually created it so many years ago before that.
Oh,
yeah,
Comfortably
I suppose
Numb
they did.
was the first Creed ballad, of course.
Yep.
And shit, what was I getting at? Oh yeah, so yeah, they didn't do a lot of like weird time signatures. It was more in the more like in the subject matter, I guess. Because the general arrangements were always very pop oriented. They only really did a couple of really long form tracks, like 8-minute plus songs, which is usually a hallmark of progressive metal too. Their place in the in that sort of vanguard of progressive metal is a little bit confusing now that you come to bring that up.
I think Queensryche, they for their portion as far as like being a progressive band, like they were very much like the 80s version of what was considered like progressive rock music like at the time. And when I say 80s version, I mean like the hair metal 80s of progressive rock. And I think like when you look at the pantheon of like, classic hair metal bands of that time, Queensryche is like the progressive rock one. Like, they are the band that like, they still, because if you look at like the video for what is it? I think it's like I Don't Believe in Love or Queen of the Reich or something. Like Geoff Tate's hair is just like out there, and like they were definitely living it up. Like they were like caught up right in that whole 1980s hair metal hair band like machine. They were were very much a part of that.
Queen of the Reich is a good example. That video that was like their first single in '83. Yeah, it's like. Yeah, they have the big teased hair, and it's, very kind of pseudo Bruce Dickensy sort of screams happening.
Yeah.
And it's very silly.
It really, and I think that's why, because in that period of time, there was a real, like, dearth of, like, progressive rock, especially progressive rock that was going to be accepted by the MTV generation. And because King Crimson wasn't making singles for for the 80s for the 80s kids that were
not really
listening to Motley Crue or Poison or anything like that. They weren't really doing it. There weren't really a lot of bands. There were a lot of bands that had really great guitar players and did a lot of interesting things, but were always in the context of writing pop songs. And I think Queensryche, they said, okay, well we're from that. Like we're from that whole hair metal generation, but we're actually talented, and we know how to write songs, and we know how to play our instruments really well. Because every single one of those guys, was just a monster musician, and and they were sort of saying like, well, we're still going to write these really sort of advanced 80s hair metal gems. That's they're kind of the AD&D of hair metal coming out at the time. I came on board with Queensryche actually in 1990 when Empire came out. I was in I think around the 8th grade, and Empire and Silent Lucidity like sort of just hit me like a sack of like just bricks. Like it, I had to be like maybe 13 years old, so I was in like prime music absorption mode, like starting to figure out like where my taste was and what it was that I liked, and that record, and in particular the videos that they came up with for those singles, like the song, the videos for Empire, the videos for Silent Lucidity, these kind of like spooky, shadowy images, and then the music being what it was, this much more acceptable, talented version of bullshit hair metal. Just really just sort of really like did it for like all of a sudden like so many things started to coalesce. And like when I think about how I've written songs and how I've like played guitar, like every now and then I'll like do a guitar lick and I'll be like, oh, I like the sound of that. And then for in preparation for this, I was going back and I was listening to Empire and I was hearing like all those old Chris DeGarmo licks and I was like, oh, that must be where I get it from, because this lick I was doing just sounds so much like Queensryche.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's like
he writes
so
some great lyrical guitar.
Oh
lines,
yeah,
too.
I mean Chris DeGarmo, like he is such a monster player. It was such almost a real shame that he hung it all up. I mean, I'm assuming he's a great pilot and has a great second career.
Oh yeah,
doing
he's flying a plane.
Yeah, and good for him. I'm glad. I hope he's happy for it. But wow, did we lose such a monster musician when he hung it up? And I'm always going to be a little bitter about that.
I will. As a Queensryche fan, will always kind of be bummed out about that.
Definitely.
I think it. You were bringing up those music videos, the Queensryche videos from like the Empire era. The song Empire itself is like a song indicting U.S. imperialism, which is not a topic you hear. Certainly not like Dr. Feelgood or Unskinny Bop, like these other fucking hair metal songs at the time.
Well,
like it's pretty heady stuff for a hair metal band to do. So that was always kind of appreciated too.
It definitely was, but you know what's funny? I don't know if you've listened to the single for Empire recently, Patrick, but that song did not age well in the modern day, because as you'll recall, about 2/3 of the way through that song, there's a breakdown where they have like a spoken word section that talks about how local municipalities, how much they spent on law enforcement compared to how much the federal government didn't spend on law enforcement. And they actually make a point about how the federal government, instead of spending money on law enforcement, they instead spent it on things like the space program and stuff like this. And because there's a lot of talk.
Oh, jeez, I never noticed that. I always heard it as like an indictment of like people unnecessary spending of law enforcement, but oh my god!
No, I think it's the reverse, because they talk a lot about, because I think the empires that they're talking about in the lyrics are more criminal empires, and of course this was back in 1990. When everybody was afraid of like what gangs were going to do, and there was this sort of image of the powerful drug lord like taking over neighborhoods.
The war on drugs had only just recently begun.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So
I'm still here, by the way.
I will.
So it's funny to listen back to that now about how this complaint of the federal government not spending enough on law enforcement. And now to listen to that in in 2020 and be like, oh, they kind of missed the mark with this one. Like this did not age well.
You know what? There's not the first time Jeff's been tone deaf, and I think we're gonna see plenty of that on this album too,
for sure.
Why don't we
foreshadowing?
Get in? Yeah, why don't we get into the meat?
Yeah,
of this
meat
record.
Okay. So we're starting this off with track number 1. This, the very first Queensryche song I've ever heard. Isn't that fucked up?
Oh, God, man.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Here's track number 1, titled Cold.
Would you wait here? Would you turn away? We've been at this too long. I don't know what went wrong. Would you stay here if I beg you to?
Even with my minimal knowledge of Queensryche, I had a feeling listening to this that this is not how they're regularly supposed to sound.
No. I mean...
Nope. what we get right off the bat is a very generic nu metal title, Cold, which is like only fitting because this song is basically Hinder with a better singer. That's what I'm going to award it.
I mean,
this is terrible.
Yeah, what really struck me about this is that I when I first heard it, I immediately recognized this as a song from the early 2010s because it is like has all the hallmarks of that. I'm especially sensitive to that because my touring days were on the hard rock metal circuit circa 2011, and every band sounded like that. Like
oh, totally.
Every band sounded like that. This was clearly a song that was written for radio play, particularly the Octane program on Sirius XM that basically played nothing but stuff like this, and it was just all these like schlocky, emo core type balladry, and it was man, and it was so disappointing to hear because there is some good stuff in the song. Like the opening riff is catchy because after listening to this record a few times, like when I just think about it, I come back to that opening riff and I'm like, that's actually a pretty good opening riff. Too bad it's recorded like crap. It's produced thinly.
I don't know if I agree that it's a good riff because I feel like that very specific kind of like note progression has just been done endlessly on so many like Audio Slave and Five Finger Death Punch that da na 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 da da na na na.
I suppose good is a relative term. I mean, I guess you could say like it's good for if it being early 2010s new core, like it's good for that. But I mean, like,
I do agree with you that it's not very well produced. It's just very murky sounding. It's like they tried to Rubenize it. Like there's no delays, there's no reverb on anything. It's just kind of all
it's
flat.
Pretty flat and two-dimensional. And I've listened with headphones. It sounded oddly like mono to me. Like there just wasn't very good panning happening. It just sounded very flat, and like all the compression just completely cut any dynamics and probably some of the panning effects out of it too.
It was it's just so ready for radio squashed, and a
WAAF song for sure.
Yeah, definitely. If AAF were still around, or it's
back at it again with the New England references.
Yeah, it's definitely tough to hear. And then Geoff Tate comes in on the song, and it's like, oh, I remember this guy. This guy is a great singer. Like, what's he doing? Oh, this is not a good Tate performance. And why is his vocals so dry? Like, what is going on?
As I mentioned, like, this was unfortunately the very first Queensryche song I'd ever heard. Like, I listened to Operation Mindcrime immediately after I was done listening to Frequency Unknown, and my first thought was just, oh, this is just the guy from Raw.
I feel like you said that about it's not the first Queensryche song you heard, because I also subjected you to their cover of Synchronicity.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And I thought he sounded like Raw then, too.
Yeah, you said the same thing, and I guess I have never noticed that.
I mean, I don't know if that necessarily speaks to Raw more than it speaks to just this very sort of generic, this is what nu metal people consider balladeering kind of vocal style. And maybe like Geoff Tate is responsible for sort of, creating the blueprint for that with his vocals, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, Geoff Tate, what's really kind of sad about it is that this was clearly an effort to create something relevant to the contemporary market, and this, like every song on this record, and this is just a really prime example of what was metal and hard rock in the early 2010s. And it's, instead of like trying to create something original, create something interesting that was very Queensryche-ish, he instead tried to create something that he thought was going to sell, and like, oh, this is what is current and contemporary. This is what all the kids are doing right now. And so he just tries to create something like that, which seems to run counter to how inventive Queensryche was historically. And it's such a bummer to basically just see Geoff sell out, but I guess that's always been his thing. So
yeah, and I think it's. I was just gonna say the riff itself doesn't sound like very Queensryche to me.
No, not at all.
Obviously, that's just because we're dealing with, we don't have Michael Wilton or Chris DeGarmo at all in the mix, so it's lacking in a certain elegance that those guys would kind of bring to the table, and it just sounds like very ready for WAAF Jaeger bombs fucking.
Yeah, I mean
for the house.
The whole record is basically a who's who of session players and B-list rockers from classic hair bands. Like if you look at the
I saw
the credits, that. Like it is right. There's a lot of like pretty well-known people on the record, but none of them are able to really save anything on this record.
No.
This one in particularly was co-wrote with a guy named Lucas Rossi, who has done nothing of interest at all.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it is kind of shocking that this guy is even here.
Lucas Rossi's big claim to fame is that he was the winner of the CBS reality TV show Rockstar Supernova.
First of all, you lost me at CBS. Like really, like that. But looking at it, like it just, there's nothing good about that. So like, yeah, I mean, how the heck did this guy even get involved? It's really amazing. So like what, you got to think like, man, Tate was really just really wanted to get something out there as quickly as possible. And I think they do mention that at one point.
We'll get into that once we start really digging into the backstory a little bit later.
Yeah, TBD.
You think that this guy, what's his name, Lucas Rossi is
Lucas Rossi.
Lucas Rossi is Geoff Tate's Jose Unidos.
That's over my head.
Bernard Rhodes from the last episode.
Oh boy. All right. I know we just said no spoilers, but I will say right now the record does not improve from here. A whole lot.
Yeah, let's get into the next one.
Yeah.
We got a
Here's
few
track
to
number
go
2.
here.
This one called Dare. Not a cover of the Gorillaz song, not the anti-drug organization from schools. Here's the track.
What do you got? What do you got to show? You can't look me in the eye. That's how I know you wouldn't dare. You wouldn't dare. You wouldn't dare hurt me. 'Cause you just might get hurt yourself.
So this is where we're going, isn't it? This is pretty much just going to be the Queensryche butt rock album.
That's what we're getting. And, I haven't really listened to too many of the 2000s Queensryche efforts, but just right off the bat, the riff that's happening throughout this song is very faint, angry. It's just like it like in the way that it's like old farts trying to write a like big boy tough guy riff or something. It's just like the guitars are just like so poorly mixed, and the lyrical vocal choices are really lame. The guitars like are really way back in the mix at one point. It's just disgusting. The song is terrible.
So this is the song that actually I wanted to mention, because you had mentioned Alice in Chains at one point, and there's actually some moments in the riffage on this song that actually do evoke a lot of Alice in Chains, the sort of like harmony guitars on this record, which only adds to my overall frustration with this song and this record, in that there was the potential for really good ideas that never really got used very well, and all the interesting things that were going on musically were muted, stunted, and pushed back so that Geoff Tate had more room.
Yeah.
And what is really the most disappointing thing on this song is Tate himself. The lyrics on this song are awful.
Yeah.
It's almost
it's very like that sort of nu metal, impotent anger, dumb machismo-y, "You'll cowards can't take me" songs.
And honestly, that would actually have been better if like that's what was actually going on. But I mean, like, it's not. There's all this. It's literally poor word choice.
Yes.
As a means of like as if he doesn't have the vocabulary to talk about like what he wants to talk about. It's almost as if Ty Tabor from King's X is writing the words for this song, which I know didn't happen for this particular song, even though Ty plays on a couple of songs on this record.
He does, yeah. He plays a couple of solos on this record.
This album does have a lot of outside songwriters on it, though. Like, there are no songs written exclusively by Geoff Tate here.
No, and actually, this is the first song on the record that was written and produced with what's his name? Slater.
Jason Slater?
Jason Slater, formerly of Snake River Conspiracy. And if you know who Snake River...
He was also a former bassist for Third Eye Blind,
which is
too.
actually a footnote, because like he was in Third Eye Blind for like a minute, and he's more known for Snake River Conspiracy. And Snake River Conspiracy was like this B-list industrial band from the late 90s, early 2000s. I actually saw them live opening for A Perfect Circle, and they were just like an also-ran. Like they...
Yeah. Speaking as a goth industrial DJ myself, I feel like the majority of people really only know them because they did a very distinct cover of Love Song by The Cure.
They also did a cover of How Soon Is Now by the Smiths, proving that they were willing to play both sides of that argument, and which means you cannot trust a single thing that they ever said or did about anything.
Slater was in a band. He was in a band with Charlie Clouser and Troy Van Leeuwen too, called Revenge of the Triads. Interesting.
Yeah. So Slater is just a guy that apparently like leached off of every like talented person that ever came around, and he himself was not really any good. And somehow he got his hooks into Geoff Tate and gave...
Yeah, because like around this point, Geoff Tate was basically in total control of Queensryche, so he got the final say on like producers and stuff like that. And as it so happened, Jason Slater produced the last couple of OG Queensryche albums.
Yeah, starting with Operation Mindcrime Part 2.
Oh, man. Did he really?
Yeah, he did that one, American Soldier, Dedicated to Chaos, and the one that we're doing today.
Dedicated to Chaos, I should point out, is one that a lot of people suggested maybe we should have covered instead of Frequency Unknown, but
no.
Too late now.
Yeah.
This one is the more interesting story, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. So,
I mean, I feel like regardless of which one we would have covered, like, the story kind of ties into both of them, so I feel like we would have been talking about it anyway.
Yeah.
Sure. Very true.
So, I feel like, Slater, you can definitely hear like he had like some ideas going on here. And again, there's a good list of players on this record. Like, it really should have been a lot better, but I think what Slater had good ideas, but didn't know what to do with them. And this song is definitely a great example of, I've got all these great ideas, but I don't know what to do with them. And ultimately, he just shunts everything through a bunch of compression, makes it as flat as possible to just basically let Tate drive the song. And unfortunately, Tate could not drive this song at all.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's awful.
Pretty unimpressive track, as you mentioned. Like, the riff is kind of reminiscent of Saint Anger a little bit. I'll tell you one thing Saint Anger did not have, though. Xylophone.
Get your hands dirty.
Not to mention the theremin solo.
Yeah, why? Why is there a marimba and theremin solo here? What is that? What are you guys trying to do? Do you think you're Peter Gabriel? You can't have a marimba in your damn song.
So on neither Wikipedia nor Discogs was I able to find a credit to who played that. So my only assumption is this is a guy who regularly just sort of breaks into studios to ambush recordings with xylophone solos.
I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe
obviously.
it.
Yeah, the phantom xylophonist. Yeah. Anyway, here's track...
Xylophonist.
Anyway, here's track number 3, this one titled Give It to You.
But you take it too far. Yeah, you know, I wanna give it to you, but you probably break my heart.
Listening to it back again, and this didn't occur to me during my previous listens, but since you mentioned how just unoriginal the lyric choices have been, Todd, I'm starting to see it a lot more now.
Yeah, there's no good lyric writing going on here, which, you know, when you consider that in Queensryche, you know, classic Queensryche, you know, Chris DeGarmo was also writing a good portion of the band's lyrics. He wrote all the lyrics to Silent Lucidity, for example.
Right.
You know, like there's, you know, obviously like his strengths as a lyricist are not to be understated, and Tate, left to his own devices, just doesn't have it. This song in particular, it does remind me of like a bunch of other like maybe mid to late 90s rock tracks. And
what it kind of reminded me of more than anything, it had like sort of tastes of Stone Temple Pilots' cover of Dancing Days a little bit.
Yeah, there's a particular song, I'm trying to remember what it is, that this is almost a note for note clone of, and I can't think of it right now. I'll probably think of it later. It's just so rough.
Yeah, Todd, so you brought up on the last track that you were hearing some things that were kind of reminiscent of Alice in Chains. This one, Give It to You, really sounded like they were trying to go for a Alice in Chains style, like half blues, half kind of like Middle Eastern inspired, like, you know, flat 5 type riff, and it just sounds fucking corny because, like, I don't know, you're like 20 years too late at this point.
It's definitely a throwback track in that sense. You're absolutely correct about that, and it's like, again, like, you know, in you've got the one song that is very much sounding like a contemporary new core sort of track, and you got this weird thing on track 2, and now you've got this bluesed out throwback tune. This record is already all over the place.
It really is, and like I think the problem is, you know, is it completely obvious that it's a throwback track, or is it that these guys are just old fashioned and just, you know,
or that they're just trying to throw whatever against the wall and see what sticks?
Well,
I guess, yeah,
and when you consider also, you know, all the types of people that were coming in and working on these songs and everything that they did, like a lot of the people that were working on this record were kind of this old guard of like 80s metal, and even the ones that weren't, you know, like, well, never mind, because I'm going to take that back, because I'm looking at the guy who played lead guitar on this song is this guy named John Levin, who's the guitarist for Dokken.
Yeah.
You know, even though
you got to imagine
imagine
that particular crowd of 80s musicians are very like set in their ways too, like this is the right way to do it, sort of thing like that.
Yeah, and you know, God, it's like, it's almost as if, you know, all those guys decided to come together. Let's help out Geoff make a record. and
oh, absolutely. And it's just like these old farts in a room just fucking sniffing their own farts and talking about the good old days.
And Jason Slater's there, with Pro Tools, being like, all right, guys, let's do something cool. And this
Jason Slater's there with Pro Tools, also passing his business card out to people.
Yeah, and
seriously, like, this is a fucking nightmare. Like,
yeah, and this is,
as much as I love making music and being in the studio and shit, like, and I loved Queensryche, like, this scenario, sounds like fucking lame as fuck.
This song is the sound of, like, a dad bod in skinny jeans. Like, that's that is what's going on here.
And like, and like, Adidas cologne or some shit.
Yeah, it's God.
Between this and Dare, I feel like you can get a very general sense theme of like getting even going on at play here.
Yeah.
Like with lyrics like the repeated refrain of "How do you like me so far?" and all that sort of stuff.
How do you like me so far?
Yeah, see, there's that there's that completely awful word choice. Like, he doesn't have the vocabulary to really express something interesting. Like, how do you like me so far? Not even how do you like me now? Like,
I feel like
so
that
far.
kind of speaks more and more to like how much Geoff Tate needed the rest of Queensryche than the other way around.
Yeah. Oh God.
It's like he's going like, what do you think? Pretty good. Queensryche songs. Huh?
There's
Pretty
7
good.
more tracks.
You're all boy
kids.
Jeff's here.
Like,
But yeah, to jump from that, like, I feel like since I bring that up, it's probably a good time to actually start getting into the backstory a little bit. So as I understand it, Geoff Tate has historically been a very difficult musician to work with, but the specific tumult that led up to Frequency Unknown seemed to start to fester with the production of the album that preceded it, Dedicated to Chaos, which, as I mentioned, was a record a lot of people suggested we should have covered if we're going for like the worst Queensryche album.
And I saw them on that tour. That was the last time I saw them in like 2011. Yeah.
Queensryche had historically been a collaborative effort, with the lion's share of songwriting split between Tate and founding members Chris DeGarmo and Michael Wilton. As time went by, however, Tate had begun to flex more and more control over the group, bringing in his own family members to run facets of the business and maintain firmer control over which songs would make which albums. On Dedicated to Chaos particularly, Tate went over the heads of his bandmates to discard their songs in favor of songs he'd co-written with professional songwriters, including Jason Slater and the previously mentioned Lucas Rossi. And on this one, a guy by the name of Chris Cox, who I couldn't find any information on Wikipedia or Discogs, so he's our first suspect for the Phantom Xylophone guy.
Oh, absolutely. Reveal yourself.
In an interview, guitarist Parker Lundgren, who had replaced the exited Chris DeGarmo and was a fairly, good songwriter in his own right, he said of the Dedicated to Chaos sessions, previously it almost felt like there was a battle between what songs to use, mainly the producers. It was almost like they wanted to cut the band out of it, even being a part of the process. That's how I felt. There were songs that ended up on the record like, I've never heard that song when we were in the studio. It was just bizarre. Dedicated to Chaos would come out in 2011 to largely negative reviews, but this was just the beginning of the chaos leading to Tate's firing. For now, though, we should probably get into another track.
Yeah, we have a few more to go here.
Yeah.
Oof. And we've gotten into a real doozy with this next one. Track number 4, this one titled Slave.
You're a slave to the light. Yeah, you're a slave to the light. It doesn't matter what you say, if I do what they do. Turn the back, yeah, they're coming for you. You're a slave, dragging your chain. Slave, you come pretty far.
You're a slave, man. You're a slave to the light, man.
Oh my God.
We live in a society, man.
My God.
This is just yet another example of, good intentions gone completely bad. I mean, I don't deny loving metal. Like, I do love metal, and I think it's fun. And so, like, this song has everything that I want, a kick-ass metal song to be, especially something with a big muscular riff to it. And it just falls flat on the production level. But you know what it is? You know what it is that drives me crazy in this song is that there was such a good opportunity with this track to modernize the sound and bring it up to code for 2013 and push it just a little bit more, and they backed out because there's a moment about, I think it's right before the last chorus, where when the drums come back in, and you may have to go back and listen to this carefully, when the drums come back in, the snare hit that is supposed to be there on beat 2 isn't there. I think the drummer just like missed it. And they didn't edit it back. They didn't fix it.
They didn't get it in post.
They just left it. And here's the thing. It's almost as if for a split second, you almost get one of those really good, bass dropped, cut time beats for a split second where you're like, is Queensryche going to get hardcore?
Are they going to open up the pit?
Yeah, they're going to, like, that's what, for like a split second in the song, you get that, and then it doesn't happen. It just does another of these lame choruses, and it's, and yeah, everything else that we've already said that is wrong about this entire record is wrong about Tate's performances here.
I know we've already kind of touched on how badly produced the record seems to sound. On this song in particular, it really feels like Tate's vocals are drowned out by these murky, languid guitars.
Like they're definitely using like a 7 or 8 string guitar on this song. Like you can hear it in the riff, like just that clunky low string that is like clearly like a heavily wound, like really thick low B string or something like that they've down tuned and is super floppy. Because they're
so like.
That word choice is incredibly funny to me for some reason.
Floppy string.
Floppy guitar string.
Oh, yeah.
No cummies,
all the
just
floppies.
Players
know about the floppy low boys.
That's Fieldy's favorite kind of string, a floppy string.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Like a big old noodle.
Yep, and you can just hear it all over in this song, and it's just, again, so disappointing. Like it's like, again, he's trying to squeeze into those skinny jeans, and it's just not happening.
It's a really dumbass song, and it's tone deaf as shit because it's like Wills was saying at the beginning, it has this the idea that everyone is a slave, which is
it's
so
funny. It's funny you mentioned that, Pat.
In rock music.
It's funny you mentioned that, Pat. If I could just interrupt you real quick. Most of the information for this album I was getting from Wikipedia, and in the songs section of the article on Frequency Unknown, they very briefly get into the subject matter of the songs on the record.
Oh my god, I'm right there.
Yeah.
Oh
ranging from like relationships, standing up for oneself, the mindset of a terrorist, and others. On the section on slave, the subject matter just reads, "The idea that everyone is a slave."
Well, that's impossible because how can everybody be a slave if there aren't any masters?
Written by Geoff Tate and Jason Slater, age 16.
That's literally,
written by Geoff Tate, Jason Slater, and G.W.F. Hegel.
Hegel. No, it's a complete logical fallacy. Everybody can't be a slave if there aren't any masters. How does that fucking work? Who are you a slave to? Anyway,
they're slaves to.
Yeah, that's basically how Hegel's phenomenology of spirit goes. Like for pages and pages and pages.
Geoff was reading a lot of Hegelian dialectics before he did the writing for this record. I'm kind of right there with Todd in if you take the lyrics out, it's a dumb but kind of fun dumb metal-ish song. The riffs are pretty dumb, but also kind of fun and enjoyable. But yeah, the lyrics just really take it to another level of just juvenile angst. I guess.
We'll talk about Juvenile in just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like Tate is really the one who's dropping the ball all over this record. He really is.
I would say. Well, he's the only Queensryche member in the fucking band.
It's like
I should hope these other guys. Are
Jason Slater sucks, and he sucks a lot as a producer on this record. But like you can tell like the ideas were there. The ideas were there, and they just weren't executed well. And then Tate comes in and just screws it up even more. Yeah. Move on.
So let's get back to this. So let's get back to the story of Tate's dismissal. Speaking of Juvenile,
oh boy.
After Dedicated to Chaos's less than stellar critical reaction, the cracks in Queensryche were starting to become more and more apparent to critics and the general public, and particularly the tensions that had developed between Tate and the rest of the band. At this point, work was done on a follow-up to Dedicated to Chaos, as well as re-recording Operation Mindcrime for its 25th anniversary, which is always, a good sign of a band who knows what they're doing. When they need to re-record like their big glory days.
Yeah. And that's a problem that we'll get into a little later on those last 4 tracks.
Oh, God, are we really? Yeah. Okay.
This all fell apart after a 2012 band meeting in which, without Tate's presence, the remaining members of Queensryche formally fired Jeff's wife, Susan Tate, whom Jeff had installed as the band's manager in 2005, threatening to exit the band unless she was brought on. Susan Tate was incredibly unpopular with the rest of the band, and she, along with Jeff, often went over the rest of the band's heads to make decisions that didn't sit well with them, including touring with a cabaret company and optioning Operation Mindcrime to be made into an animated film. Geoff Tate was enraged by this decision and got into an argument with the rest of the band during a show in Sao Paulo, Brazil. During the soundcheck, his anger would boil over as he wrecked drummer Scott Rockenfield's kit in anger and spat and physically assaulted Rockenfield and Wilton. The show would ultimately go on as planned, but Tate continued to spit at Rockenfield and threw water on Wilton's equipment over the course of it. At this point, he would have been 52 years old.
Wow.
What the fuck? What the fuck, man? Like, I don't know, like, at 50, you should just be, like, with your homies, playing as a legacy act to your fans who love...
Hell, 50, at, like, 30.
At 30, you could
you shouldn't
reach
be
that conclusion.
At 30, you shouldn't be doing this shit.
No, seriously. I mean, that's more like it. No, that's absurd and just like such like rock star diva bullshit that I would think that they're better than, but apparently he's not.
I think the band was definitely better than it. I don't think Tate was.
The band is definitely. I would hope that Tate would have been kind of, of the same mindset, but apparently he's not. I'm really learning a lot about him. Studying for this record.
First of all, I'm surprised that Geoff Tate could do any damage to Scott Rockenfield's kit, considering all the chains that Rockenfield had on his kit, man.
Oh, man.
I watched the music video for Silent Lucidity for the first time last night, and I finally got to see the chain symbols that you alluded to.
It's very
beautiful. Beautiful. I love them.
I do kind of like the chains. Like, if I were in a metal band, I would.
Yeah,
they're so not.
No, I'm actually totally fine with the chain symbols. I really am. I'm totally fine with it. I mean, especially for the period of time that happened, like that was perfectly placed. Yeah, probably now it's totally hokey, but
nightmare fucking mic all those.
Oh God, I know. But
that has like the same energy of like some middle school grade to a like new metal band or something like that, where the drummer just deliberately like takes a hammer to his cymbal and puts it upside down on his kit because it's just like, oh, I like it because it sounds different. That has that kind of energy.
Considering I literally have one of those set up on my kit right now.
I mean, I first got into Queensryche in middle school, so that totally tracks, I guess. But
oh man. Anyway, Tate continued to act out over the next several shows, and over time the rest of Queensryche decided they couldn't work with him anymore and dismissed him from the group, declaring that he'd tarnished their brand. Believe it or not, that's the TLDR story of Tate's dismissal. If you want an even wider picture, however, there are official court statements available at the Queensryche fan page, Anybody Listening. And what I've been saying barely scratches the surface of all the crazy shit connected to Geoff Tate that's been going on. You can go to like anybodylistening.net/lawsuit to get all like the files and just sort of they're worth a read for sure. Especially Michael Wilton's official court statement.
That has taken some serious wind out of my Queensryche fandom sails right there.
And yeah, that the tarnish the brand thing really does sort of speak to your point about how they've just become so cold and clinical at that point.
Well, you linked us that one court document from
Michael Wilton.
Yeah. From Michael Wilton, and it literally has the plaintiffs here Queensryche Merchandising Incorporated, a Washington corporation. Tricriche Corporation, a Washington corporation. It's just like, what the fuck? Like, what happened to just like playing with your boys? Just fucking writing some music with your homies. This is like so just lame and boring and clinical and
they're not Geoff Tate's homies. They're slaves.
Well, everybody's a slave, Lils. Don't you know that? Did you know that you are? Did you know that I am? You know that Jeff Bezos is? Did you know that Rodrigo Duterte is? You know that Paris Hilton is?
Insert Kardashian.
You know, all the greats.
I didn't expect today that this would be the episode where we get like the red yarn line drawn between Paris Hilton and Rodrigo Duterte, but here we are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Let's move on to track number 5. This one titled In the Hands of God.
I thought of every way out of this, every way out. Won't you tell them the truth when they find me? Won't you tell them it's in the hands?
This one I think is just kind of okay, which is slightly better than what we've been dealing with before, but still not great.
So I actually, my first note for this song was, finally a Queensryche sounding song. This is probably the first instance of something that actually was reminiscent of, I couldn't really pinpoint what Queensryche song, but it had that sort of pseudo-Eastern soaring feel that I would kind of expect from like some of the classic Queensryche songs. And in that effect, it like is probably the first one that I kind of mildly liked. It's still produced terribly.
Yeah. And Tate has this very kind of annoying, like trying to be David Bowie vocal fry that he's doing throughout it as well. That really got kind of grating.
Yeah, he could do that earlier in his career. Now it just sounds like really hokey and like he's putting on a false Bowie accent or some shit, and yeah, it's pretty cloying. We're treated to a Ty Tabor guitar solo on this song.
Oh, God. Is this the first one? Because he's actually on 2 songs. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I think this is the first one.
I don't know. At least Ty Tabor's not writing any of the lyrics or singing on it, so like that's good.
Oh, yeah. This is for sure another one that just gets killed by how ridiculous the lyrics are. Like in the Wikipedia article on Frequency Unknown, this is the song that's listed as being about the mindset of a terrorist. And like, if you isolate the lyrics from the rest of the song, it's just the most over-the-top and melodramatic kind of Andrew Lloyd Webber bullshit you've ever read.
Yeah, and
like
it's just...
here's a portion of the lyrics to give you an idea of the weird fucking musical theater production playing in Tate's mind. This is the day. Familiar voice on the phone. Are you ready? Yes. Then put it down. Come to places of the plan. Are you ready? Yes.
That's a excellent Geoff Tate impression. My God. I thought he was in the room. You guys would know
better than me. Has Geoff Tate's lyrics always been this fucking ham-handed?
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Really?
Like, it's sort of, it's like he thought he could kind of get away with it because he was a showman about it. But yeah, it would kind of get clumsy at times. There were definitely a lot of those moments on even Operation Mindcrime, which is one of their more celebrated records. And there's a few tracks like earlier in their career that like try to be hair metal but also sci-fi at the same time. And yeah, he's like doing this
having gone back and read the lyrics to Operation Mindcrime myself, a lot of it really does kind of sound like InfoWars.
Yeah, I'm definitely not into Operation Mindcrime. I actually think that record is super overrated. But I think Queensryche was it's a really good example though of just how when you hit that age that music really starts to mean something to you, whatever record you get exposed to first by a particular band will come to, I think, define that band for you. Because I've got friends that are maybe 3-4 years older than me that were getting into music right when Operation Mindcrime hit, and they fell in love with that record and they swear by it. Whereas I came a little bit later and got into Empire first. So, you know, my internal bias is always towards Empire, and I can't figure out for the life of me like where the real dedication to Operation Mindcrime comes in, because it's such a ham-fisted record.
I mean, the way you're describing it, it sounds like most of it was nostalgia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, well, especially now. But I mean, I'm not talking about people that, like, you know, that got into Operation Mindcrime when it first came out in like '88. So, and now, like, when they talk about like, oh, what's the best Queensryche album? They're like, oh, it's Operation Mindcrime. Clearly, I'm like, is it? Are you sure? Have you read the lyrics to that?
Thematically and even musically, Operation Mindcrime is very different from Empire.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
By a lot.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that's the point where I just sort of pinpointed in trying to learn more, where it was just like they took such a precipitous and abrupt jump from something vaguely resembling progressive to just, you know, glam metal tropes.
So, yeah, I mean, Operation Mindcrime was so much more metal adjacent, and then they got much more like pop focused by the time you get to Empire. It really is like a huge difference between those two records. So it's not too difficult for me to figure out like why someone would favor one over the other, because they're not really that much alike. I kind of benefited from, I purchased both kind of around the same time, so I just learned to accept both into my life, I guess, and like learned to kind of appreciate them both separately, and could kind of see some tying factors between the two, like, you know, mostly in the guitar playing and shit. And I think that probably is like what I got the most enjoyment out of the band anyway, was their melodic choices.
Yeah, I think, because even on Mindcrime, I still really like all the guitar parts and everything. It's really the lyrics and just the vocal performances on Mindcrime that just bug the crap out of me.
Yeah.
All right, back to the story of Tate's forced exit from Queensryche.
Here we go.
After the freak out,
still exiting.
Yes,
all these years, been exiting.
It's taken a while because he's kicking and screaming.
Oh, totally.
After the freak out in Brazil, as well as several similarly uncouth live shows in Maryland and Oklahoma, Tate was dismissed from Queensryche on either June 5th or June 6th by a majority vote from the band over a conference call that Tate withdrew from before the vote. They would later bring on vocalist Todd Latour, whom they'd been performing with under a side project called Rising West. On the 12th of June that same month, Geoff and Susan Tate filed a lawsuit in Seattle court, stating that he had been fired illegally, as well as filing a motion to deny the rest of the band from using the Queensryche name. The motion to prevent Rockenfield, Wilton, and Jackson from performing as Queensryche was denied, but this also meant that while the judge deliberated on the case, both acts were legally able to release records using the name Queensryche at the same time. And that is where Frequency Unknown ultimately came in, as an effort on Geoff Tate's part to beat the rest of the band to record stores in releasing an album bearing the Queensryche monitor, an effort which ultimately resulted in some notable problems with the audio, which I'll touch upon a little later. That race to get there first and how it pertained to Tate's anger towards his dismissal is even reflected in the album's artwork itself, which prominently features a fist punching through the backdrop with a set of brass knuckles attached, emblazoned with the Queensryche band logo and the letters F and U. For Frequency Unknown, of course.
Of course.
So edgy,
And,
much lording.
And Geoff Tate was originally going to use his fist, but
I love this.
He opted for a hand model because he wanted something more masculine and with hairier knuckles.
At least he admitted that he had his hands were too dainty to.
Of course he is. He's a fucking lead singer.
I know.
He never
right?
has to carry anything.
That makes so much sense considering the whole attitude, the whole Napoleon complex attitude this album has.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about it.
Ultimately, a settlement would be reached in April of 2014. The name of Queensryche would belong to Jackson, Rockenfield, and Wilton, and Tate would no longer be allowed to advertise himself as such. In return, however, Tate was given sole rights to perform the Queensryche albums Operation Mindcrime and Operation Mindcrime 2 in their entirety as specialized performances. He would even go on to name his solo band Operation Mindcrime moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, Operation Mindcrime 2, that's such a big get in the proceedings.
Yeah, way to win.
Yeah.
Oh, Geoff.
Yeah.
Jeffy,
Anyway, back to
Jeffy.
Frequency Unknown. Here's track number 6, titled Running Backwards.
If you could go nail into the wall, keep running, yeah, keep running backwards, running backwards, running backwards, running backwards. Had you on your back.
Okay, so in my original notes, I had this as another Just Kind of Okay song, particularly pointing to KK Downing's guitar solo. But listening to it again now, that fucking delivery and the beginning part of that clip,
That vocal performance is unacceptable. How
That's
did that
bad.
How did that pass muster? That is like end of the day. You should have fucking drank some tea and like got back at it the next morning because that was embarrassing.
So
That was awful.
So this was also one of two songs that he co-wrote with Martin Gregorian, who was the musician that played all the instruments on the re-recorded songs at the end of this record.
Oh, we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
a little
What?
later.
That was him doing all the instruments? Oh my god!
Yeah,
What I
that's
learned-
hilarious.
Martin Irigoyen, who's previously performed with Thomas Dolby, Skinny Puppy, Voltaire, Abney Park, and this kind of shook me a little bit, is one of the main guys in the band Vernian Process, which is a steampunk band who I know as doing an incredibly solid cover of Goth Night staple, the ubiquitous Mr. Lovegrove by Dead Can Dance.
So
Cool.
This
I don't know
guy-
what any of that means.
Well, I do.
I thought it was cool.
And this guy, like, I think is actually possessed of some really good ideas, because this is another song, which I think is just going to be the theme of this record, is that there's a lot of good ideas in this song. I think the parts are interesting. I think the production, again, totally suffers. But the problem, once again, is Tate and Tate's delivery and Tate sort of necessitating himself at certain points throughout the song is what's weighing it down. Like that constant repetition of the running backwards, over and over again in these, when everything's ringing out and like trying to like take it down a notch, and he's still just being histrionic all over these parts. It's like someone really needed to rein Geoff in, and I think maybe that was one of the real serious strengths of what the other guys in Queensryche were
because Jason
doing.
Slater wasn't going to do it.
Jason Slater was just bringing the checks over to the bank. Like that's what he was doing.
Geoff was Jason's meal ticket.
Yeah, so he was willing to let Geoff do whatever he wanted. And Martin Gregorian, I totally get it. I looked him up. He's about my age. He probably got into Queensryche about the same time that I did, and he learned those songs and he loved them. He probably loved Empire, which is why there's 3 Empire covers at the end of this record. And so somehow he got that call to work with Geoff Tate, and he ran at it. And God bless him.
Of course. I would.
I think there's some really great stuff on this song. There's some great ideas on this one, and the other one that he does that we'll get to later. I think there's also, again, some other really great ideas. But oh man, the weight of Geoff Tate, the weight of Tate, the Tate weight,
the Tate weight.
He doesn't seem interested in letting the musicians do their thing. He wants to match the same sort of histrionic energy that the guitar players are doing. And yeah, it's just like he just needs to take a few breaks. Like he sounds tired. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we've basically reached the half point of the album. So let's take this opportunity to dig into some critical opinions. For the most part, reviews for Frequency Unknown were pretty mixed, but frequently tended towards unimpressed and negative. Tom Jurek of AllMusic.com gave Frequency Unknown 2.5 stars and stated, as a whole, Frequency Unknown suffers from subpar, muddy sound, which basically mars the entire record. Krista Titus at Billboard gave it 2 stars and wrote, nothing on Frequency Unknown sounds like the finely crafted rock he designed with his former bandmates. Whatever duress those post-DeGarmo albums were created under sound like Queensryche, thanks to intriguing atmospherics, compelling dual guitar interplay, sophisticated tone, and arresting hooks. None of those elements are heard here. And on Sputnik Music, staff writer Trey, that's it, it's just Trey, he gave the record a 2.3 out of 10 and summed his score up thusly. Frequency Unknown definitely proves a few things, but none of them are positive. It proves that Geoff is willing to rush a subpar product to his fans and that his separation from the rest of the band was for the best. This isn't a good Queensryche album and is barely passable under any other name.
Yeah, no, that all
Here,
is
here.
Pretty valid to me.
Yeah. Here's the thing. In spite of these reviews, Frequency Unknown definitely doesn't reach the level of negative critical opinion that other albums we've touched upon have garnered. By contrast, the record that Wilton, Rockenfield, and Jackson put out after Frequency Unknown, a self-titled one released in June of 2013, received pretty glowing positive reviews and much higher scores from Billboard and Sputnik Music, hailing it as a musical return to form. On top of that, the actual Queensryche album managed to reach number 23 on the Billboard charts in record sales. Frequency Unknown, by comparison, only managed to peak at number 82. And I know sales aren't everything, but still.
I do appreciate that there is an image of a Roland Jazz Chorus JC120 amp on the page for the self-titled Queensryche album that the rest of the band would release. I don't know why. It's a great amp. Nice chorus, clean sound. Check it out. The Roland Jazz Chorus JC120.
Queensryche.
There's probably one on Craigslist for like $150.
Anyway, track number 7.
Yeah.
Track number 7. This one titled Life Without You.
The chances that we take, the promises we break. There's no life without you, life without you, life without you. What's there left?
This is why I was apologizing up at the front for my notes being really bad, because I literally don't know what to say about this, just because it's more of the same.
This song,
it's generic butt rock. The production's flat.
Yeah, I mean, this song is
just not good.
Like could very easily come out of a late '90s radio rock playlist. It's not inventive at all. There's nothing exciting going on. It's one of those songs where, like, that particular drum pattern, that like doon doon da doon doon da da doon doon da doon doon da da, is, it's like, well, we just don't want to do a regular 4 on the floor here, so let's change it up a little, guys, and like, you know, comes up with this. Wow. Also, if I'm not mistaken, hold on, let me go back to the notes here. I'm pretty sure that this is a song that Paul Bostaph played drums on. Yes, it is. And wow, that is tragic.
He's slumming it, you think?
Yeah.
Oh, from Slayer.
Yep. Paul,
Wow.
I
Oh,
was
boy.
in Slayer.
Interesting.
Bostaph like plays on 4 tracks. This is one of the 4 tracks he plays on. And
it's such an uninteresting drum part too.
yeah, like this was definitely like done for the money. You know, it's
Like that could have been written on Addictive Drummer.
I have written that on Addictive Drummer, and nobody would have known the difference. like
seriously, it's for that kind of name recognition, you think there'd be something a little more exciting.
Admittedly,
weirdly enough, the guitar solo in this song I kind of liked, and then I went and looked it up who did it. It's Brad Gillis from Night Rage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, sure. I guess good for you, Brad.
Sister Christian, your time has come.
Wow. Hey, there we go. Come.
First one.
I regret walking into that.
Yeah, it's just
right.
God. Yeah, there's just so much wrong with it. I mean, and again, like it's so sad that there's so many great people playing all on this record, and and it just can't be saved. There's no amount of talent that you can throw at a song if the song is inherently bad. And unfortunately, it's really pointing out to me that Geoff Tate is inherently bad for all the talent that he possesses as a singer and his ability to hit notes. As a writer, he's just trash. And
there's a sort of Dunning-Kruger effect probably happening where he thinks he's a lot deeper than he really is. Like the subject matter that he dips into like isn't as deep as he thinks it is, but like he's just going for it, and because of that, he just comes off as taking himself way too seriously.
Yeah,
it's embarrassing.
This whole conceit he had during this time of like, you can't kick me out of the band because I am the band. That all just comes crumbling down when you actually listen to the tracks here.
Geoff Tate is the kind of guy who would paint an image of the Marianas Trench on the bottom of his above-ground swimming pool just to give the illusion of depth.
There we go.
I like that.
I just came up with that. I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
So I feel like we've danced around it enough. Let's talk about the whole production snafu regarding like this incredibly flat production that we're listening to. Like so many facets of the record, it has its own story as well. In the lead-up to Frequency Unknown's release, there was a primer in beating the version of Queensryche featuring Wilton, Rockenfield, and Jackson to getting an album with the Queensryche name attached to stores as some kind of means of, like, claiming the name. Like, this is the true Queensryche or something like that. In the process, a lot of time that should have been spent properly mixing and all that sort of stuff to the album, it was kind of cast by the wayside in order to get the record out more quickly. The original mixes were leaked to SoundCloud by Cleopatra Records, who owned Deadline Records, which was the label that put this out, and it was deemed unacceptable by the public. So the songs were taken back and given to Yes session player turned current bassist Billy Sherwood to remix the record.
Yes, good old Billy.
Yeah. Deadline Music spun this as just sort of an audience participation game of sorts, just in the most ass way possible, declaring, now fans will be able to decide which mix they feel best represents the album. The original mix, which will be released on April 23rd, or the new mix by Billy Sherwood that will be made available at a future date to be announced. We remix, you decide. Fuck off.
Fuck off. No, you do your job and mix the goddamn album. Us as audience members is not our job to fucking pick out mixes. Half of us don't fucking know anything about. We don't have the ears to do that. Come on.
This is kind of like
so stupid.
This is kind of like Geoff Tate's being like, this is what passes for audience engagement in the day and age, right, guys? Like, we just let people pick stuff like they do on American Idol. That's a thing still, right?
You want to listen? You want to listen to our car mixes? Like, no, fucking finish the product and then show it to us. That's like literally like you don't release an unfinished product like that.
I mean,
for the masses to hear, like it's an audio no. That's so stupid. Even if you are doing some sort of audience participation thing, it's just a bad idea.
On the one hand, the only artist that I've actually heard of doing this sort of thing successfully was Cell Dweller, where during the making of his album Wish Upon a Black Star, he released several like in-process versions of songs, and historically has submitted a lot of like early versions of songs and like released them as like a B-sides collection or an alternate takes collection, so that people could hear the way songs evolved over time. And I think like the early versions of Wish Upon a Black Star were released like 2 songs at a time, and there would be like the song, and you would also like when he would release a song for the record, it'd be like, okay, here's the finished song. He would have it. Here's the finished song, and now here's 10 other versions of the song that I made and kind of like, but ultimately discarded in favor of the original. And I can take that. I think that's interesting in a way to like sort of understand his process for how he developed things. That's not what they're doing, though. That's not what Queensryche is doing in this example. Queensryche is just...
They're not a major label rock band. It's not the same.
Yeah.
They're just trying to cover their tracks.
Yeah. Here's why it sounds crappy. It's your fault.
It was on purpose the whole time.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And if you chose the bad mix, well, that's on you.
So 5 days into remixing the record, however, Sherwood ended up withdrawing from the project, citing scheduling issues. The record would ultimately still be remixed from the originals, but many more mix engineers had to be brought in to ensure that Frequency Unknown would make the release date, including engineers famed for their work with bands like Die Krups, Cinderella, and Steve Vai. The Billy Sherwood mixes would eventually be released as a companion disc to the original in the deluxe version of Frequency Unknown, which someone must have wanted.
Yeah, Geoff probably owns it.
And those mixes, those Billy Sherwood mixes, well, let's just say as unimpressive as this record is, I guess in some kind of weird, perverse way, it's a little reassuring to know that they could have been so much worse if Sherwood had been allowed to finish them. Like, here's an excerpt of Sherwood's mix of the lead single, Cold. He found a way to make it flatter.
So is he just using like just the overheads on the drums? Like, and that's like, is that it?
Those are so loud and like roomy sounding. Those drums. they even over this like aliased version of the track that we're getting like through Skype. I could hear how like unbalanced those drums were. Holy shit! I would have expected better from Billy.
Oh, boy, oh, boy. All right, so for this next one, I'm going to play 2 tracks in quick succession because I feel like, once again, you know, like how I did last time, they're both kind of indicative of just the album on the whole, so it doesn't really make sense to play them separate. Here's track number 8 called Everything.
If we lean that way, I know it could happen.
And here's track number 9, titled Fallen.
Yes, I know that you're falling. I believe you could say anything. You'd say anything when you're falling.
Completely interchangeable.
Oh, God. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I'm
just generic modern rock tropey kind of stuff.
I know. Is there anything left to say at this point? I mean, I'm literally running out of ways I can say Geoff Tate is horrible. I just
yeah.
It's killing me because it's starting to ruin the rest of Queensryche for me, which is really frustrating. Like just seeing that, knowing like what we really could have had like, obviously Chris DeGarmo realized this very early on and left when he did, and and I mean really we lost the wrong Queensryche guy back in the day when DeGarmo left, and it's just,
I think he was a huge part of what made the band interesting to begin with.
And this just makes it so glaringly apparent. Like I give credit to Michael Wilton where it's due, because I know he was also a big part of their songwriting. And he was also clearly working to rein Geoff Tate in a bit, but
right.
Oh God, these last couple of tracks are just so bland. Ugh.
And I think it's interesting to point out that Silent Lucidity, which was one of, easily one of their biggest singles, was actually completely
it was a
penned by
top
Chris
10 Billboard
DeGarmo.
single.
It was completely penned by Chris DeGarmo.
Yep.
He wrote lyrics and music to it. So you have to wonder if like Geoff Tate had some sort of, resentment there that, is Chris DeGarmo, was turned out to be the one who wrote the big single that they released.
I think in Geoff Tate's mind, he definitely would have resented DeGarmo for that, even though, that's all.
It still made him money.
It still made him money, but it's also because Silent Lucidity is just one of the best vocal performances that Geoff Tate ever does on any record.
I'll agree with that. Yeah,
I mean, every vocal melody on that song is so timeless. Even like that high note he hits like towards the end of it, like when he hits that high note at the end, it's like I'm still singing that. 30 years hence, I'm still into that. And that's how good that was, and that's something that that only like Geoff Tate, because Geoff Tate is still a quality singer, like genetically, I guess, he can be. I mean, he really doesn't have anything to feel bad about, when it comes to Silent Lucidity, even though he didn't write the words. I mean, like that vocal performance is something that only really he could have done, and but given what we know about Geoff now and seeing, what he's like when he's divorced from the rest of the quality players of Queensryche, just how lame he actually is, it just makes listening to songs like Silent Lucidity just really, really sad, for completely different reasons than they should. And
so I have a couple of notes on the songs. For Everything, I had to point out that really corny piano patch at the beginning. It's 2013. We have much better samples at this point. We have, I don't know, it sounded like the patch was from the 90s or something. And it was
the drum loop, too.
And the drum loop, too, was just like really dated it. And then I had a note that says, what the fuck is this 90s boy band breakdown that happens in the middle? It kind of goes into this thing that like the chord progression sounds, reminds me of Backstreet Boys or something like that. And there's like some sort of layered vocals. And yeah, that song in particular sounded very dated. And then Fallen, we get like questions, very magical mysteries adjacent. Like, I think I read on Wikipedia that song is supposed to be about addiction, but it really just comes off as very juvenile and hackish again with the lyrics. And it's interesting what Todd was saying about when Geoff is divorced from the rest of the band, he really doesn't have the inspiration that he did when he was with more interesting musicians. And maybe it's not necessarily his fault that the vocals are really lame on this record, because he's trying to sing over lame songs. Like the songs themselves are pretty lame too. Like the musicians at times aren't really giving him enough to work with.
Everybody's phoning it in.
Also,
on this
other
record.
times where they did, I think, make an effort, and he's just too up his own ass or something.
Yeah, these songs, it's just more of the same for me. I mean, like you brought up, this probably speaks more to Geoff Tate being left to his own underpinnings without like any veto power without the rest of OG Queensryche. But if these songs were presented side by side to me with no context whatsoever, I doubt I'd be able to distinguish them from like more recent, more mopey post-grunge acts of the day.
Yeah, I mean, this song, this whole album is just so it was definitely like written from the perspective of like, how do we make a record that's going to sell to the contemporary rock audience of 2013. There was no attempt to create anything original, and every single song suffers as a result of that. Again, for whatever good ideas that there might have been in these songs, they suffer under the production, and they suffer under the overall, I guess you could say, meta of, we're just trying to make a contemporary rock record. We're not trying to make a classic record. We're not trying to make a record that is going to be a meaningful part of the Queensryche discography. We're not going to try to make a record that lives up to any bit of that legacy at all. We're just going to try to make a record that's going to sound good on Octane, on Sirius XM. You know, like that's all that they were going for, sung by Geoff Tate. Lame.
Completely interchangeable. I doubt I'd be able to tell the difference. But can you? Let's find out with a brand new segment that's totally all the time going to happen on every episode henceforth. One is a disgraced metal vocalist posing as a pale simulacrum of the beloved band he once held. One is a dour bro-rock band, frequently mistaken for a much deeper and more layered band. But which is which? Find out on Geoff or Ben! Welcome to Geoff or Ben, the game show and a podcast that's sweeping the nation, probably. I don't fucking know. Here I present you with a set of lyrics, and you have to guess whether it's from the Queensryche record Frequency Unknown or seminal post-grunge sulk rockers Breaking Benjamin.
Oh, my God.
Hands on buzzers, gentlemen.
All right, I'm ready.
You ready?
Bring it on.
All right. Here's your first set. I can't feel anything at all. This life has left me cold and damned. I can't feel anything at all. This love has led me to the end.
Buzz.
Yes, Todd.
That's Breaking Benjamin.
That is correct. That is the song Red Cold River by Breaking Benjamin. Ding, 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 ding. Here's the next one. You're getting by the dues and the red too. You've been living large in my heart. I get back to you. What are you going to do when it all falls apart?
Buzz, that's Queensryche from Frequency
Yep, that's
Unknown.
Give It To You by Queensryche.
Yes!
Currently tied up. Here's the next one. Like a rocking chair above this ice, and they played our songs. Don't play our song. Again, I'm breaking.
Buzz. That's Breaking Benjamin.
Nope, that is Life Without You by Queensryche.
No!
Wow.
Okay, next one. Are you with me after all? Why can't I hear you? Are you with me through it all? Then why can't I feel you?
Buzz.
Yes.
Is that Queensryche? Frequency Unknown?
No, that is Ashes of Eden by Breaking Benjamin.
Man, this turned out so
and now
this suddenly became harder
than
I anticipated. All right.
Both tied up. We have one more, and this can make or break the game. So here's our last one. Never made it as a wise man. I couldn't cut it as a poor man stealing. Tired of living like a blind man. I'm sick of sight without a sense of feeling.
Buzz. That's Nirvana.
Clearly no one wins this game show.
No one ever wins it.
Yeah, that's it. Just go home. Go home. You don't get the home version of the game. Go away. Yeah. No, the game show's over. Yeah. I did warn you guys I had an incredibly dumb bit planned.
Yeah, we didn't know about this.
This was great, though. That's more fun than I really anticipated, so I definitely should be a regular feature.
I'm glad that was fun because that leads into like the very last song of the album that we're going to be reviewing anyway. Or is it? Anyway, here's track number 10, the last original song on the album, The Weight of the World. It's the ballad. That's all I've got.
It's the ballad, all right. I mean, it's slow. It's definitely slow.
It has a writing credit from Randy Gain, who provided keyboards over the majority of the album. I don't want to be like too overtly critical of it because it was inspired by a heart attack he suffered in 2012. But all I've got is it's the ballad.
The song itself sucks, and here's why. The vocals at the beginning, I really noticed the production anomalies. They were obviously very processed, but also the compression choice was not good. The vocals were like very pumpy, and like every time he punctuated it, it would like kind of smack you in the ear. And that's just like hackish production right there off the bat. And then the song, the tempo is very slow, but the guitars just can't lock in. They're rushing over the whole thing. They want it to be like 5 clicks faster than the drums are playing it. So
yeah. Okay,
it just sounds messy.
I wasn't sure if that was actually happening or not, but I legit thought the guitars weren't tracking up to the songs like in to like the other tracks in multiple points of this song. But since you mentioned that, yeah, that's totally happening.
Well, yeah, they're playing like too fast for the beat, or playing like against it or something, and yeah, it just sounded sloppy as a result, and
or like
just,
Jason Slater
drag.
forgot to like push the track in like GarageBand a couple notches to the left.
Oh yeah, exactly. Could have nudged it back.
I mean, there's another thing that bugs me about this song, and is that, you know, when there's a problem with a lot of modern albums, especially with like metal records and hard rock records, that there's this desire to make every song sound like sonically the same in order to create a certain amount of uniformity from song to song. And I understand the desire to do that and why that seems like a good idea when you first start doing it, but there are times when you really need to have your recording service the song, and this one doesn't. Like, those plodding drums are like these big metal kicks, these big metal snares, and it sounds so out of place for the type of vibe that this song is trying to accomplish. You're trying to write a song about mortality. You're trying to write a song about having a heart attack and about the depression and the doom that comes along with that. But there's nothing in the production of the drums or the guitars or anything that really evoke that at all. And that's because they're trying to make the song sound, or really to make the song's overall tonality conform to the rest of the album, which is just an amateurish way to doing it. It's like, all right, I've already created the template in Pro Tools. I don't want to deviate from that because I'm trying to mix everything or I'm trying to produce it. It's a lazy and disrespectful way to go about making a record, because it's not letting the songs be themselves. And so it's like you have like 10 kids, and you're trying to put all 10 of those kids into uniforms. And there's one kid that just wants to be goth, and you're not letting that kid be goth. And it's sad because that kid is probably now having serious emotional problems because they've been disrespected so much by their parents. And that's what this song is. It is the disrespected child. And
yeah.
Considering like how uninventive the rest of the songwriting was, I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a thinking with this one that like this needs to be the sad song, slow equals sad and emotional, stimulus.
Yeah, and there's, I thought like sort of a tie back to classic Queensryche towards the beginning of the song, but yeah, then my note right after was just anybody listening, this ain't. That of course is like the big ballad closer on Empire and the namesake of the website that they have. Yeah, I think it's indicative of very amateurish production to just sort of have a template for all your songs, and I think it was literally just a time saver to load all of the settings from the previous tracks and apply them to the drums on every single song, and probably same with the guitars too.
Definitely.
And it has the appearance of being a sort of polished product, but it in fact is a very amateurish way of going about things, because you're more interested in saving time than you are in servicing the song. And yeah, because of that, this song is probably like one of the more difficult ones for me to listen to on this record. And it's not even because of the subject matter, which is too bad because it's, you know, it's obviously has more emotional weight than, say, Dare or fucking
Slave.
Or Slave. But like, it sonically was just probably one of the worst. It was 6 minutes long and it felt like 8. It was just, it was just a real drag in every form.
So that's the last of the original songs, and now it's time to address a pretty big elephant in the room.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
This is bad.
Some of you listening might be wondering, wait a minute, Lils, that's not the end of the album at all. So along with the 10 new tracks from Tate, Slater, and company, perhaps to further cement their attempted status as the one true Queensryche in their eyes, Geoff Tate also produced 4 new versions of previous Queensryche songs from the Chris DeGarmo years. These songs were I Don't Believe in Love from Operation Mindcrime, and from their biggest selling album Empire, the title track, Jet City Woman, and Silent Lucidity, which, as we mentioned earlier, doesn't even feature a writing credit from Tate. The story goes that Tate wanted to rearrange and reinterpret the songs to match his own aesthetics, but this was promptly shot down by Cleopatra Records. Now, in the YouTube comments, there's a lot of mixed opinion on whether the new Tate-penned songs were good or not. Some like the new original stuff, others consider them pale imitations of Queensryche. A solid majority of commenters agreed that the covers were the worst tracks on the record. Like, I've opted not to get too deep into them just because I don't really see much point in doing that. If the intent was for Tate to define himself as the better of the two Queensryches, then really the album should be judged on the original material as opposed to the covers. But I'm still going to play a few clips from them because, well, just listen. Here's how Tate's take on I Don't Believe in Love turned out.
I don't believe in love. I never have, I never will. I don't believe in love. It's never worth the pain that you feel.
Oh, that.
2 words. Yikes.
That's not even the worst. The first verse, I listened to this version today. The first verse has he just whiffs a complete vocal crack, and then one of the guitar players hits a fucking bum note. He hits a wrong note. How does that even happen? You can literally go into Pro Tools, and it takes 2 seconds to fix that edit.
This must have been what all those reviewers were honing in on when they called this record a rushed project for sure.
Like absolutely.
So bad.
I that was the only one I listened to all the way through. The other 3 I just kind of kind of sampled here and there just to see how terrible it was. I think the I Don't Believe in Love one was probably
it was definitely the worst. It was definitely the worst. What's it?
Tate may not have been a very great vocalist for the majority of Frequency Unknown, but he's at least been pretty competent, I would say. And here, he's hitting flat notes and writing that ridiculous Jerry-only vibrato pretty hard. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's
bad.
It's really bad, and you'd think he would know better. Like he's been singing those songs for almost 30 years. You'd think he'd be a little more rehearsed for them. It's really frustrating.
They have the vocals have like a live quality to them, like they sound like scratch vocals. Like he only did 1 or 2 takes or something.
Well, because he probably did only do 1 or 2 takes, because he was probably like, "Oh, I'm Geoff Tate. I've been singing these songs for almost 30 years. I know what I'm doing."
2-take Tate. Sure.
We gotta beat him to the punch. We gotta get the Queensryche album out before Rock and Field and Company.
But the record's already done, Jeff. We don't have to do these other 4. Shut up.
And it doesn't get much better than that. Here's what Tate did with the re-recording of Queensryche's biggest hit, Silent Lucidity.
Face your fears, retrace the years, and ride the whims of your life. Commanding in another world. Suddenly, you hear and see this magic new dimension.
It's like the delivery of someone who does karaoke professionally.
Oh, my God.
That's exactly what it is.
One of those guys who just hustles from karaoke bar to karaoke bar.
Yeah, that's Jeff's night down at the down at Hajar's Lounge in Weymouth, Mass. Like, holy shit.
This I should mention also features Jeff's wife and daughter on backing vocals, doing the part.
Good. That's great. Glad you got the family involved.
Yeah.
He was doing something
we got
weird
nepotism too.
Yeah. He was doing something strange with the timbre of his voice too. Todd pointed it out. Like it was much more nasally.
Yeah, much more reedy.
It really cuts like not nicely through the mix. Really ruins it. And then did they have to bring in a whole orchestra again to do the orchestrations, or did they just do that in the can?
I'm pretty sure that was all done in the can because these songs were all performed by Martin Irigoyen. So,
sure. So he probably did like the string arrangements.
He probably did that all himself in Pro Tools or whatever.
And I don't begrudge Martin Irigoyen for that
Not at
either.
All. I don't begrudge him one bit for being a part of it.
He was just doing what he was told.
Yeah, he was clearly fanboying out just because he was like going to have the ability to record versions of songs that he clearly loved and to work with Tate that he clearly loved. Because I mean, you would have to be a massive Queensryche fan to like want to go to the lengths that he would have had to go to make these songs happen. And I get it. He's of that age group where these songs hit him when he was probably in middle school or high school or something like that, and probably when he was getting into music and he fell in love with them, and this opportunity came up and he jumped at it. I don't begrudge him. Aside from I Don't Believe in Love, which does have some of the mistakes that Patrick mentioned, I think a lot of these takes, to Irigoyen's credit, are actually pretty good.
Yeah, they get a little better. Really, the I Don't Believe in Love was probably the hackiest one, but like instrumentation wise, I mean, the vocals are just fucking trash over all four.
Yeah, it's Tate ruining them.
Yeah. I'm not going to play clips of the other two, but I think you can use your own pattern recognition to guess for yourself whether it gets any better. It doesn't. But that means we can finally put this album to bed and give our final thoughts.
Oh boy.
Patrick, do you think this is a worst of all time record? I asked as you were taking a big glug of water.
Ooh, I mean, that is an excellent question. I don't even know what that question means anymore. 55 episodes. It's certainly the worst Queensryche album I've heard. I think it's very embarrassing in a lot of ways. So I think for a band that like held some sort of legacy at some time, for them to go from that to do something this delusional and just pointless and hackish and just trying to relive the old days. In that sense, I would say, yeah, this is a really bad album. Possibly one of the worst, simply on the re-recordings alone, because that's just such a hackish thing to do as a legacy act or even just as an aging musician. Nothing could really be like more of a pathetic attempt at trying to reclaim the old days than to do as Geoff Tate, do a new version of Silent Lucidity, a song that he didn't even write. Like,
he was covering himself.
Do that. He was covering a Chris DeGarmo song. Like, that's what he was doing. And the whole thing is just pathetic.
Offensive.
It's offensive and it's musical necrophilia. Like, it's
I like that.
We don't need to do this, Jeff. It just sucks. And I didn't get a chance to listen to the other Queensryche album that came out that year from the rest of the band.
Full disclosure, I have not as well.
I'm going to assume that it's better. But I think, yeah.
Featuring vocalist Todd LeBose.
Fuck it. Fuck it. This is probably a worst of all time sort of album. I'll say that.
Same question to you, Todd. Do you think this is a worst of all time record?
I mean, I'm folding my laundry now because it's marginally more interesting to me to fold my laundry at this moment than it is to even consider this record for anything anymore. I mean, this record is incredibly disappointing. But I'm disappointed in it for reasons different from Patrick's. The thing that really stood out to me listening to this is how much it tried to shoehorn Geoff Tate and the legacy of Queensryche into the early 2010s new core framework for making records. The production style, the style of songwriting was very reminiscent of was very much of its era. And there were so many better records and so many better bands that were making records like that at that time, that this record comes off as so completely hackneyed and just like a gross disappointment to a really gross swan song for a singer that deserved so much better. Like Tate deserved better, and he's really kind of screws himself with this album. His fury at being fired from Queensryche or whatever, leaving Queensryche or whatever, and his disgust with his former bandmates really did like such a huge number on him. And of course, what we know about Geoff Tate now, his ego trips and his awful behavior towards fans, and that's all happened in the wake of that. And then to try and make this new core knockoff album, at some points I almost feel bad for him too. Like, how bad was Jason Slater taking him for a ride, in the course of making this album? But then again, I don't know. The songs are so terrible, and I'm just sort of so beyond pissed at that Geoff would allow this to happen, or that maybe that this is what Geoff has always been, and I was wrong. And
I think that's a big part of it, is that this was very revealing about this guy who I used to have enormous respect for, really. And I lost a lot of respect for him.
I feel like a jerk. I feel like a jerk for having, regarded Geoff Tate so highly for so long, not really being aware, and that he was actually this shallow and this kind of pathetic. And now to like listen to this and see like the raw Geoff Tate, I'm just like, okay, this dude is not any better or more interesting or even more intelligent or savvy than any of the musicians that I met in my old touring days back in 2011. Like he's just as big a douche. And I met dudes on the road playing in indie bands and unsigned hardcore metal bands doing the Midwest metal circuit that were infinitely more interesting and infinitely more talented than he is. And it is just a bummer, a serious downer that we even have to put up with this, that we even have to be here today to talk about it. Like, holy crap. Like really, what were you thinking? And I'm angry about its existence. Yeah. Like existentially, I'm angry.
It was really better when I just ignored everything that the band did past like 1999. Right? That was, they might as well have just broken up by Here and the Now Frontier, and it would have been better.
I mean, I didn't even like really follow them that much after Empire. Like Empire was a great record, and I didn't really I got into other music like going forward from there. That's when I started getting into other stuff, and I didn't really keep up with Queensryche after that. Heard like a few songs off Promised Land and Here in the Now Frontier, and I guess there's some good things about those records, and maybe they're worth exploring in their own way. But I don't know as if I really missed a lot. But now that I'm hearing this, I'm just like, all my good memories of Tate are just kind of wrecked, and I hate that.
Yeah.
I feel a bit weird giving my final thoughts now because you guys gave just such impassioned opinions on this. But in the end, this album just wasn't compelling in any sense to me as either a train wreck or anything approaching a good record. Like, it's very clearly a bad record, but I know I'm going to forget it just as quickly as, I remembered it. And I can't even really, muster up enough energy to, like, really get too angry at it for being a bad record, just because, I went into this knowing nothing about Queensryche. And even though I've tried to do my research, I listened to both Operation Mindcrime and Empire, their two biggest albums, and I'm just thinking Queensryche just isn't for me as my thing. Like, what was more compelling to me was just the backstory surrounding it and just the absolutely crazy onion to peel that was the story surrounding Geoff Tate and the legal battle and all that sort of stuff. And in that sense, it's kind of made it very difficult to judge this record on its own very limited merits without also judging Tate, whom I went from knowing absolutely nothing about to believing him to be one of the biggest shitheads in rock history. Like, I mean, there have been assholes in the history of rock music, but I'm loath to think of any that have been quite so gleeful in destroying their reputation among fans, while also financially and creatively rat-fucking their own bandmates over the course of so many years, like Geoff Tate had.
I think Ed Kowalczyk of Live comes kind of close. And it's funny because those bands are like kind of similar to me in some ways.
Yeah, and he did the
just
Heads
with like
album.
But Ed Kowalczyk is back in the band now, as I understand it.
Oh, he is back in the band now. You're right.
Is this another ridiculous story that I'm unaware of? Ed Kowalczyk and Live?
Yeah. Christopher knows more about that
I don't care about talking about it.
Yeah, we don't need to get into it.
If there is one, what do you think is the best or least bad track, Pat?
I went with In the Hands of God. You really can't rate this thing lyrically because it's pretty juvenile throughout, and the lyrics to that one are just But we get that kind of pseudo-Eastern soaring feel of a classic Queensryche song, and I couldn't put my finger on what it reminded me of. Maybe the title track on Promised Land kind of comes close, but I think that was just the one that attempted to remind me of Queensryche, which I would think that they would try to do since it's fucking called Queensryche, but who knows? I'm not Geoff Tate or Jason Slater.
Same question for you, Pat. I already asked you. Same question for you, Todd. What is the best or least bad track, if there is one?
Well, I mean, I'm not really going to look at this as trying to what is the best song that evokes the legacy of Queensryche, just like what is just the best on this record. And
I don't think we can do that based on like what we've heard.
Yeah, and I think I'm actually going to lean on Running Backwards. Musically, that was the one that I think spoke to me the most. Even though Tate's and it has nothing to do with Tate's vocal, because Tate's vocal is god awful in that song, but I think the rest of that song had a lot of really good ideas and good performances on it that really deserve to have a different singer. Which I can't believe I'm saying that, but that's what it is.
I'm going to say my best / least bad track is also Running Backwards, but I rate that entirely on the basis of the KK Downing solo, which was really the only thing that made it approaching like tolerable for me. What would you say is the worst track, Pat?
That was tough. I'm really tempted to pick Slave, but I actually enjoyed a few of the riffs in that song. I think overall Dare was pretty terrible for the production, lyrical, vocal choices, and it was just proof that he is out of ideas and he's working with just dumbass material, so he's gonna sing dumbass shit over it. It just was a disappointment to hear as someone who expects more from this band.
Same question to you, Todd. What is the worst track?
Cold, the opening track. It is such a dated post-new core track. There's nothing original about it. There's no attempt to do anything like kind of interesting with guitar tones or production. It's just like, hey, we wrote a song for radio. It's so cookie cutter. It's so bland. I'm a little annoyed at how bland it is, and I can't wait to just sort of be away from it. Like it's the type.
Now that we've exercised ourselves of this album,
I've been working out to this record for like the last 3 days, and it is.
Oh no!
Yeah, because that's usually like when I get like a lot.
Literal exercise.
That's like when I get a lot of my like listening to music time is when I'm at the gym and I'm like doing like some cardio or something like that. That's when I get to like really listen to records, and yeah, it's just God, that opening song is just, it's such a bummer, and so much of this record is just not conducive to doing anything exciting because none of this music is really exciting. But that song especially, it just made me think of that period of time in the early 2010s when everything sounded like that. And
it's so bland that literally Chris Lord Alge wouldn't even mix this.
My worst track, I'm going to say, is Slave. Like, I mean, all of the tracks on this album where Geoff is really trying to, get even on his old bandmates, those already kind of, fall to the ground with all the intensity of, like, a wet, limp lasagna noodle. But, I feel like this song also presents itself as, like, a song with big ideas of, it's trying to do that, but it so very clearly isn't without realizing it, and I can't abide by that.
Just that description of the song on the website, the idea that everyone is a slave, it's literally like 15-year-old angst, like bullshit, and angst without any sort of like motive.
Yeah, what is this fucking live journal horse shit?
Exactly, and it's just so tone deaf. It really is whew, man.
I'm so tired of talking about this record. I love you guys, but I am so tired of talking about this record. It's making me so angry.
Then let's stop.
All right, let's. I think we've done. We've talked enough about
Thank
it.
You so
Todd.
much for being on the program.
Thank you for having
Todd.
me, guys. It was a lot of fun. It really was fun to talk to you about this completely horrible abomination of a record.
Do you have anything you want to plug?
Please check out the new Down City Armory album. We released it actually back in May. But of course, with quarantine being what it is, we're not playing shows or anything like that. But it is out. It's available on our Bandcamp page, downcityarmory.bandcamp.com. We've got sweet T-shirts. Please get a T-shirt. We, of course, donate all our proceeds to... charity.
Yeah, that was the show I was looking forward to spinning at the most all year, just because of how solid the lineup was.
Yeah, the record release party for that was going to be so off the hook, and please wear a mask and try not to breathe vote, and try not to breathe too heavily on people. Yeah.
Have you got anything you want to plug, Pat?
No, I guess just check out some of the other shows on the Zero Science Network. But you usually say that too. We got a couple of new ones though. We got Sophomore Slumps with Austin Scholl from the previous episode.
He was just on the show.
And he was just on the show. And I'm actually starring on an upcoming episode. So check that out. And then finally got a new Must Watch Movies episode out this month on The Cook, the Thief, his wife, and her lover, and brought Nate Nemitz back on again. I think he's going to be joining me for probably most of the Must Watch Movies episodes. But and I don't know. I got some music coming out soon. Nothing really worth mentioning yet, though.
As for me, I'll plug the thing that you said I was going to plug. Go check out the other Zero Science podcasts, Old Men Yell at Cloud, Clamshell Case Files, World of Commotion. My other podcast that I do with our good friend Scott Kurland, Hell is a Musical, where he tries to get me to like movie musicals, and it doesn't always work. Depending when this comes out, I have a companion EP for my Fatigue album, Illusory Things, coming out for the next Bandcamp Friday, so be on the lookout for that.
Very cool.
And that's what we got, I guess.
Yeah.
Our theme song does it. Our theme song is Sunny Day by the band Froggy and the Friendship. You can check them out at froggyandthefriendship.bandcamp.com. If you have an album you'd like to suggest for us to review or would just like to leave us some feedback or a comment, email us at jukeboxzerospodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/jukeboxzerospodcast or on Twitter at twitter.com/jukeboxzeros. You can find us, rate us, review us, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and now Amazon Music. What? Yeah, that's a
fingers
feature.
Off my podcast.
Yeah,
Bezos.
that's a Spreaker distributes it there now.
Oh, all right. Well, sorry.
Or check out our archives on the Zero Science main page. Jukebox Zeros is a production of the Zero Science Network. For more great podcasts, go check out zero-science.com. That about does it for this episode of Jukebox Zeros. I'm Lils.
And I'm Patrick.
And remember...
Hey, guys, knock, knock.
Oh, no, Father Alexander is back. Guys, we need to end the episode before Father Alexander gets back on mic.
Science.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! 3 Local Idiots Farm Podcast!
Hey, all you out there in podcast land. Are you bored? Maybe you're sitting in traffic? Or maybe you're toiling away behind your desk at that dead-end job you just can't fucking stand anymore. Have I got a solution for you? Why not mosey on over to that search bar at the top of your favorite podcast app? Don't worry, I'll wait. Type in Old Men Yell at Cloud, a podcast where 3 unqualified musicians rifle through their vinyl collections and discuss their unwarranted opinions for everyone to enjoy or not enjoy. Check it out on the Zero Science Podcast Network.